today we are looking at famine and food security in Africa, focusing on the United Nations goals dealing with sustainability and hunger, and but from an Africa viewpoint. Africa specifically, it's already in a food crisis as we speak. Armed conflict plays a significant role in the manifestation of famine. Droughts also significant. The United Nations define famine in the following words. They say famine refers to an acute food crisis and regarded to be the worst form of food shortage that threatens the population with starvation. Officially, the United Nations defines that there is famine in the following situations where there's 20% of households that suffer from extreme food shortages. 30% of the population is acutely malnourished. And thirdly, where you have 2 out of every 10,000 people that die daily from food shortages. Against this background, today we have Prof. Bisschoff very well positioned to talk on this topic with his specialization in marketing and agricultural business. Christo focus on this and are doing continued research on sustainability and hunger in Africa. So in this second part of the series, for our viewers, the first one, we dealt with the problems and we tried to highlight them one by one. For this one today, we are looking at improvement. So, Prof. Bisschoff, what is the world food demand and how is it changing?
Yes, Prof. Botha, the figures are commonly thrown out there, and I'm just going to recall it. Within a few years, 20 years or so, we will hit the target of 9.8 to 10 million by around about 250. Today we're looking at 8.5, 8.6 within a year or two. So we see that we're going to add another billion, 1.2 billion people to Earth. Now, if we look at that, that's the figure everybody says. And then they look and say, where will we get food for another 1.2 billion people? But it's only half the truth. I said in the first video, I'm not going to depress you guys, but I think I can. Actually, I have some bad more news. All right. So this is half the truth. So what is happening in the world? Now, unfortunately, I'm just going to, not so much in Africa, but I'm first going to talk a bit about the world, what happens in the world. And as we've seen in the first video, the first world, or the developed world rather, produces enough food, and when they have more, then they would donate to Africa. And if they, what is surplus? And if that surplus we saw was 13% less, then Africa gets 13% less. So if we look at that, we see that in the developed world, we're looking at much better health services. We're looking at much better living standards. And therefore, people are getting much older. Now, unfortunately, you do not stop eating the day you retire at 65 or 70 or whatever. You continue to eat. Oh, by the master, but the older people eat a bit less than I'm having my kilogram steak at the moment. But if you look at that, people commonly reach the age of 85. This is the first part. So people get older. People are more healthy. If we just look at statistics from Canada, the Canadian males get almost 23 years older because of their excellent health on cardiac, focusing on cardiac health. Koreans is expected to get 90 years because of low obesity rates. Sorry, guys in America, you're not going to make 90, nor will I. I love my steak. So as a result, when you talk about 9.8 billion people, you're not talking about 9.8 people. You're talking about people that live longer that will continue to eat. And that number is not discounted in the 9.8 billion. So it's estimated that a person from 60, 65 up to 85, 90 will on average eat 30,000 more meals. It's a huge amount of extra meals. So that's the first part. And 35,000 more meals in his lifetime. So on the one side, you have the increase of numbers. On the other side, you have people living longer. And they keep on eating. And this means, if we look at projections, not 2070, not 2060, 2030, we look at the current food production times 60% extra. I don't know where we're going to get that. More than double. And this is what we're looking at. At 2060, it's even higher. Now, of course, these are estimates. These are the figures by a very renowned futurologist in food, Australian Julian Cribb. And I've followed him for many years. He's very seldom wrong. I really hope he's wrong this time, but it doesn't look like it. So that is the world food situation. And yes, in Africa we saw with the Russian-Ukrainian war, and after they made the agreement that the grain can, for both countries, can be shipped out, a total of 650 ships, 615, have left to deliver grain. 11 came to sub-Saharan Africa. So where's the rest going? It's not going to Africa. So the expectations of huge donations of food is going to put Africa in a very poor position. We see our needs are increasing, our numbers are increasing, and yet the aid and assistance decreases. So that decreases. I moet nou maar dat uitstay. Right. Okay, that's basically a summary of the world situation touched on Africa.
Lots of changes that you highlighted there. Very interesting to look at the changes also in the populations. So which key factors influence food production that will satisfy this world's food demand?
Yeah. This is a very interesting question, because where will the food come from? This is actually what we're looking at. So what do we have to really provide this food? So the first one, of course, is the liquid gold, water. Now, for the first time in 10-15 years, that huge dam in the USA, the Lake Mead, has actually increased, but it's still around about 40%. It does not get back to full capacity. And all California's 92% of California's salad is produced of United States salad is produced by California. And that's the way the water comes from, etc. So yes, first one is water. Now the question is, what do we do with our water? South Africa is a water scarce, goes a bit better up in Africa. They do have huge rivers and so on. But the problem is not really water, it's the distribution or location of water. That's the problem. So to get it distributed, and that's what the USA fairly succeeded. They take the water from the Colorado River across the deserts to the west side, to California, to the fertile soil, etc. But in Africa, it costs huge infrastructure. And we don't really have that infrastructure. So water is a problem, the distribution of water. Another one is that the distribution systems we have is old and inefficient. And I'm talking about sub-Saharan Africa. And I just saw in an article where they say 37% of water is just lost in transfer, leaking, spilling, bursting pipes or canals or whatever. So therefore, we lose about 40% of our water. We have 60% of a scarce water source, and this needs big money to fix. Not unfixable, but it costs big money to fix. So distribution of water, safeguarding the water, the quality of the water. Arable land we've talked about. However, there are also some bit of bad news. So if arable land are not properly protected and managed, the latest farmland report shows that in Africa, we are losing 1% of topsoil per year. Now, this is actually good news in the sense that 60% has not been deforested. So we lose 1% of 5% of the, but it's still a huge, it's 600 million hectare. It's 600 million hectare that gets eroded. So very rich soils from Mozambique, Angola, Zimbabwe, Zaire, and the Congo, and those areas are actually 1% lost. And taking over a long time, 1%, 1%, 1%, is really damaging. Climate change I've talked about. I don't want to really move back there, but we see that in India, in some areas, grain production has fallen by 45%. Most of those were exported or donated. So when we tie that back to why is Africa getting less donations and help, this is one reason of many reasons. So they have less and they can give less. Not even talking about if they want to give. It's just the physical comparison. So that's the one. Another thing, climate change is the one. Looking at the oceans, the oceans is maxed out. They reached their peak about 2 years ago, when we were 3 years ago, when we harvested a lot of fish. 90 million tons of fish were harvested, and from there on it's been declining. Currently, we're looking at 79.3%, after 79.3 million tons that we could harvest. So that's a 10 million tons less than a few years ago, and that's about what can be sustainably harvested from the sea. The problem that we have is almost all fish that's been caught are filled with some kind of plastic. So we're sitting in a situation that it's not only Africa. I'm not saying Africa is innocent. We're not innocent at all. Asia is the biggest contributor to plastic in the seas and the rivers. But contaminating a good food source, which can provide us with food, and we expect more from it. So this is not going to happen. So extra food for Africa, forget fish. Rich fish fields we had was all in, a lot of them was there next to Somalia, and these guys have all turned pirates because of some good reasons in some cases. And yeah, so it's not you cannot fish there. You cannot fish there. The other foreign countries have fished out their fish, and that's why they turn to piracy. But that's another story. What is positive is that if we farm with fish contained in the ocean, aquaculture, that has grown 47%. And although it's not really around Africa's coast, nothing prevents us to start good agriculture, because a lot of our ocean still has got very good quality water. So we can do that. So yes, there might be a possibility, sir, to add to our food. A very difficult one is consumerism. I've been in Tasmania and they got these fantastic apple orchards. But the Asians has decided they do not like this variety of apples, which they loved for 20 years, but now they don't like them anymore. So they've got to pull out all these fantastic, highly productive apple trees and plant other apple trees. And that's consumerism. The housewives want the red meat, which we both know meat is not red. They want the yellow big peach, and that's what they buy. The others they don't want. Yes, it's excellent food. So consumerism is a bit of a negative one. It contributes to the wastage of food. And I haven't even touched on that. Maybe I should say that all food that produced on a farm, 60% gets wasted in some way or another. And I'll get back to that one. The pollution that I've talked about, we pollute our rivers, we pollute our waters. If I only, on a very micro level, see 10, 15 years ago, the success we had when fishing for species in the Vaal River, and today you have basically 1 or 2 or 3 species. In those days, you got a lot and much better size. So yes, bad quality water, bad quality fish. So freshwater fish is also out. They used to harvest in dams in the Vaal River, huge amounts of excess carp. If it gets too polluted, those fish is not good for human consumption. There goes another food source. So we've got to start looking at how we treat our natural resources, or we're not going to do well. And yeah, these are just a number of issues. Also, we have the climate change. We see, for example, contrary to very long-term yield productions, the far west of the country is actually producing yields that's actually just as good or even better than the high yield maize productions in the central areas, which is fantastic. Where we looked at 2-3 tons an hectare, we're looking at 8-9 tons a hectare, which is a very good, and there we can get a lot of food. But we must not lose it, for example, on other areas where production is lower. But yes, that is your typical production factors that's available to us. And if we manage that wisely, maybe we can push in an extra food in the market.
Yeah, the distribution channels, of course, also disrupted for many reasons at the moment. But Prof. Bisschoff, what possible solutions are there to alleviate this situation that you just sketched?
Yeah. I've got a number of, in my research, found a number of issues that we can do, and I've categorized it into 3. I said, firstly, let's look at solutions to increase food production. If you want to do that, so the first thing you should do is what's doing well. What am I doing that's doing great? And at all costs, I must sustain and continue with that. And these would be typically, and there's strong movements on it, to sustain the ocean health. Try and reduce pollution. Clean up the rivers, because the rivers are the biggest problem. They wash into the ocean everything that everybody throws in it inland. So if we can clean up the rivers, prevent the pollution of the river water, then we would have a better quality river which can provide food, and then also better ocean to do that. To do something like that, we need a total change of population perception or population views. Not throw down a piece of paper or plastic bag. Start getting the people, educate them, get them into saving, go get us into a recycling mode. And I'm not talking about South Africa, I'm not talking about Africa. So if we can limit pollution, that would be fantastic. And that would definitely improve our water and our sea quality. And then it can produce better food for us. And we're trying. We're not so successful, but at least we're trying. The second thing is we should maintain farming activities that has high production on arable land. And if for a moment, if just for a moment, we can forget about the social and political consequences, and we just look at food and production, we should move to high commercial production, where we have good yields, more food. And why I say so is you can be politically unhappy or socially displaced, but if you have food, you live. If you're socially very happy and displaced and you don't have food, you're going to die. And this is happening in Africa. So what we need to do is we would look at to maintain farming activities that produce high, and that might be for governments to initiate some system that subsistence farming can be upgraded into more productive, high-yielding food production. We're looking here at the lesser of two evils, I must admit. But I mean, the most dangerous evil is hunger. That's the second thing, and this is still under maintaining what we do well. And then also continue to develop cultivars that are doing well. And try and curb this extreme consumerism and consumer demand. Because taking the apple tree again, it's a tree that produces a 3-4 years and they come in full production only long after that. And then the consumers has already changed. Now we want green apples. Now we want that apple. Now whatever. You see, so we must try from a marketing perspective to market and get a positive perception, if we just take apples in this case, of the cultivars that's there available. And not let the consumers jump all around to others, so that we got to re-establish new production, because in that taking out planting, we lose 3 or 4 years good production figures. So that's what I say is my first solution. What we are doing, we should do well. We must keep on, we must maintain what we do well. The second thing is we must look, what do we have? We've got a lot of stuff that works well, and we're going to maintain that. But maybe some of those issues have, those production factors have a better outcome. Maybe they can be better used. Maybe we can improve them. So I classified my next group and I say, solution 2 would be to make more of what you have. And something like that is definitely I mean, that's the solution to the world. Get the 65% arable land and put it out there for, how are we going to do it politically, socially, all those things? I don't know. But looking as an agricultural economist and agricultural food security point of view, yes, a bar of gold and we can't touch it. Because people are fighting all around it. There's corruption, there's no infrastructure. We just can't develop those land, and it's there. It's a golden bar of gold that's there that can solve not only Africa, but the world's problems. So definitely arable land, that's the one. Then the second part that I'm talking about, the undeveloped arable land, then the arable land that's being used, similar to what I've said with the small farmers, and now we upgrade that to a commercial farm, that we can do better with that arable land if we can find suitable solutions to politically do that. We grow aquaculture. I've just talked about that with the fish. Pollution reducing, infrastructure. We had that when we talked about the government in the first video. Governments should provide enabling infrastructure or environment for farming and for food production. We've seen it in another project in the Congo, that they had this fantastic development, and by the time the fruit gets to the market, it's either smashed into pulp, or it's the sun has burned it. It's not suitable anymore because it's such an infrastructure and the roads so bad and so on. So infrastructure and proper water usage. These are key production issues. And yeah, then comes a very interesting one, and that is the final one is those two will not save us. We must also innovate and get new products. Now, I've give this to many of my students as an assignment, and I say, listen, 60% of the world's food gets wasted. Now we take that, we go fetch it at the hotel, and we give it to our pigs. Well, that's one way of recycling, but not probably a good way. How can we make 60% of the food that's wasted usable again? And maybe, you know, if you've got a good stomach, you can watch the old movie by Charlton Heston on Soylent Green, where they make pellets of all the wasted food. But then, of course, the green, now I'll leave that for the guys who want to see it, what the green pellets are made of. So maybe we can make little beanos or dog pellets, which is actually human pellets, and we can get concentrated food that way, protein pellets, whatever. I just see there's a big opportunity of 60% of the food that's somewhere getting wasted. If you don't believe me, go to your child's school hostel at lunch and just stand there at the kitchen door and see what comes back into the kitchen, what's wasted. So yes, rework food in another format. I think that's a good idea. Other thing what we should try and do is even though we can't solve Africa's 7,000 conflicts, maybe we can identify smaller areas with good arable land and do it like piece by piece, you know, like a piecemeal solution, and try and recover these smaller pieces and turn them into arable land. And once we start to be successful with that, more and more people will see this is a model that can work. And then, of course, the artificial food. It's a bit expensive at the moment. In 2013, Professor Mark Prost at Maastricht University developed a burger, developed a patty from cow stem cells, and that was the first burger. You can Google that, and as I said, but expensive. It's $333,000 for the burger, but they reckon at the moment they can reproduce it for around $15,000, which is not totally out of the market. But in 2030, 2040, scientists reason that they will be able to produce the following: cowless milk, chickenless chicken, eggless eggs, butter without milk, and then, of course, meat. And that in 2030 already, a huge amount of entry-level meat products, like bologna, my beloved garage pie, and sausages, will start to contain artificially grown lab meat. And in the test they did, just as good. The test subject could not really tell the difference. Another interesting possibility, but that is more related to developed countries, some are already doing it, is if you look at cities, where are they built? They are built on the best soil because there's water. Usually they built on good fertile land. Look at Johannesburg. Johannesburg is, if you look at the map of Johannesburg and without the buildings and original map of all the rivers, and it's a fantastic agricultural area. But now it's full of concrete. But it's a huge area that's taken away, a huge arable land that's taken away from the percentage of arable land. But can we not use our cities to start produce? And that's where the concept of agritecture comes in. Vertical farming, farm without soil. And we see that Sweden's tax office is a farm. It's a building, but on top of it, and on the sides and everywhere, they have food growing. So that's a possibility where we can actually add a lot of food. So this is basically areas not easily accessible. I must add that. But that is areas that we can peruse and investigate to up our food. Because one thing is sure, at this moment, there's more people that's hungry and it's going the wrong way. Not that we diminish it, it's actually increasing. So to come back to your original question to say, can the United Nations eradicate? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah, no, thank you for that one. Food scarcity is a reality, and countries must understand the mechanics of the shortages. A quick last question. Are we going to make it here in Africa?
I sincerely hope so, Prof. Botha. I sincerely hope so. But if I look at the research that I've done, yes, there's several ways that we can increase food production. That's really true. Africa will benefit the most if we can loosen up more arable ground, increase production, and so on. So yes, I think that's a very positive one. The fact that there is something available. Now, if you ask this question to somebody who's in Romania, I mean, every piece of land is plowed. Every piece of land, even town people have an acre that they do something with. So it's not there. There is nothing to work with. Yeah, we got stuff to work with, yet it's a bit locked away. But if we can unlock it, it's there. We have potential. That's the big thing. That's very positive for me. The thing that's worrying me is that if the world population increases, and say, for example, the US or Europe, their population increases, and they will first look at their own people. So they will do an estimate and say, we need so much wheat, we need so much corn, etc., rapeseed oil, what. And then they will use that and say, this is our supply plus a safety supply. So what is left? Maybe that can go to Africa, maybe that can go to Asia, wherever. So the free food, the donations, we see it all the way. It's declining, economic conditions getting tougher, so therefore countries are not so. We saw during the Trump, when he was the president, that a lot of these freebies got cut off. And rightly so, in the sense that why should your own people suffer to look at foreign people? And therefore, I say again, I really think we're going to move in an era where charity starts at home, and then from there on, we help other people. So first feed your own children, and then help the neighbor's children. So I really think that's a tough one. and that with the needs of Africa increasing and other one is diminishing, I think the gap will widen, and I think we will strike 240 million starving people. In my personal view, I'm not so sure. I think Africa is in for a tough time. I think we're in for a tough time. And government should wake up, because the resources are there, not the money, but there are physical resources which the world need to feed the world, and we can negotiate that very positively. Because it's not only Africa that's going to get hunger, there's a lot of other countries that's also going to run into this trouble with not as quick as Africa, but within a number of years. And here we have got production means. So this is an asset we can negotiate on very well. And I think in that sense, there will be relief. But at the moment, with all the conflict and so on, I don't think so. Unfortunately, I'm not concluding that. I think we're looking at tough times.
Prof. Bisschoff, thank you very much for your time, for the interview. I think I must agree that it's important that countries must take cognizance now and start to make their plans to manage these food shortages. Thank you for your time and for your insights for our viewers. This is part 2 of the series that we just completed on famine and food security in Africa. So for those of you who are really interested, please look at part 1 as well, and let us know when you like it. Thank you, Prof. Bisschoff. Thank you, everybody.
Botha, thanks a lot. Goodbye.